Hello and welcome to the 7th part of this top-down programming logic series. My name's David Thorne. I'm from Thorne Web Design. Now, just to go over what we've done in the past 6 tutorials, just to recap, we have one, created a login interface. We have 2, created a login class stroke object. 3, we have created a login model interface. 4, we have created a login model class object. 5, we have outlined the login process. 6, established a folder structure. 7, utilized a factory process of loading object instances and interface models, etc. So that's what we've done so far. Now, the questions which we've got is, once we have verified that a user, if I can learn how to spell, verified that a user is logged in, we need a user object which can determine all of the properties which the user has. Okay. Essentially, yes, the user's logged in, but when it comes down to the likes of privileges, what the user can see, what they can do, whether they want to send messages, whether they want to upload images, and so on. You know, we're not really interested in what the website does, but we just know, hey, there's a user. Therefore, at one point the user is going to want to do something. If it's just a website or a program where it's just reading stuff and you don't need to be logged in, there's no need to have a user at all. You just have, you know, the content and loading content, loading pages, loading data, loading images, this, that, and the other. But when it comes down to having users, predominantly people that give access to others to do something, there needs to be user verification first of all, and whether they've got rights and privileges to do things. So there needs to be a loaded user at one point. Therefore, to me, logically, the next step is to actually have the user object. Now, the points that we need to have here is essentially, 1, we need a user object. Now, if we're going to have a user object, then we need to have a user object interface, and which means we need to have a user object model, because we're going to be wanting to update things within inside of the user or whatever, you know. So there's things that we need to be able to do. Now, we're not concerned at this time about databases and what properties and the column names and the table names and so on. We're not concerned about that at all, because they're of no relevance right now until we've got business logic of what these things are going to do and how they're going to do them. And the designers of the website program, we don't care about. They've just said it's going to have a user, and the user needs to be there. Okay, and remember, we're just programmers. We don't care about what what the website or the application looks like. We just care about whether the code is correct. That's it. The marketing team or the design team and the actual kind of logic team, they tell you, yeah, the user goes from this page to that page, and we need to verify that the user has those privileges to do it, and that they can upload a photo, or that they can send a message to someone. The buttons and the pictures and the stuff, we're not interested about whatsoever. Who cares? You know, let designers do that. We just care about, they say, the user's clicking a button that we've made, and that is then going to click on another user, and then I want the user to be able to add in some data in this little box that I've made, and that text that they've got in there, I want it to be able to send to this other user. And if it's worked out and it's fine, then I want to know everything was alright, and it's going to display a little box saying message sent. So ultimately, I need to give you the user which I need to send the data to, the message which I want to send, and I want you to tell me that it was sent. That's it. Be like, good, well that's easy enough. That's abstracting it down to the raw fundamentals of it. So essentially what we need to do first of all is we need to create a user object interface, okay, to define the user, okay, and we're not defining the properties of the object yet. We want to define a user, okay, and what methods it has inside of it, okay. And once we've done that, we can then define a user object, which is going to be effectively the base user object, and then what properties it's going to have, and how they interlink with the user object interface. And then the model is going to be anything to do with communicating with the database and so on. So that's where we're going to start off. Now, as we decided that all interfaces go inside of the interfaces folder, so we're going to say user.interface.php, and that's what we got. And we're going to create a interface user interface. Now what does this user need to be able to do? Well essentially, we don't need to have a constructor there. First of all, we need to be able to load the user, yeah. So once we've got a user object, we need to be able to say load it. We don't care about whether they're logged in or anything like that. We just need to be able to load the user itself. So we potentially need a load function, okay, and this is gonna have a user ID, which is going to load it, because we've got the username as such is username, password, and the login is to log in to receive that one user ID. The cookie is the thing that's going to save the user ID. So when it comes to the next call, we need that user ID to be able to load that one user, because remember, it's the first time when they go into the login, it could be on a completely different domain, completely different part of it. Therefore, when it does come back inside the cookie, that's going to have the user ID, which we can use to load the actual user itself. So we can't just focus on the login page itself. We need to focus on once they are logged in and once we're testing the cookie. So we don't really care about the username of that one part. And once they are logged in, we will have the user ID, which means we can load the user. Although the user is actually kind of already loaded, but in a website, for example, that's going to then once the login's done, it's going to then change the page layout, which is going to do a redirect to another page, which means that all of that stuff that was in memory already is going to be deleted. So it's pertinent that we've used the user ID. So we're going to have load, and this is going to be an integer, and the name of the function method is load. Loads the user information from the database using the user ID as an identifier, and this should return this is Boolean, because this is just to tell us whether or not returns true if user is loaded and false if not. Okay, that's as simple as it gets. It's that this load is not about returning the user. That's get user. Okay, so the next one is, once it is loaded, is essentially get user. Whoops. Now we could say that get user is a load as well. So we could turn around and say user ID equals null. Okay, which would mean that if it is null, then it's already been loaded. If it's not null, then it means that we've got to load the user. Get user loads the user. Okay, this let's just say what it's going to return first. It's going to return user object, okay, which is something that we need to create. If the user is not loaded, then it will be loaded. In this case, and the user ID requires to be provided. If the user ID is is equal to null, then it is assumed that the user has already been loaded. It's then in the events that a call is being made to this method without supplying a user ID, then a call must be made to the load method providing the user ID. As simple as anything. Okay. Okay. If no user ID has been provided and load has not been called, then an exception will be thrown. Simple as that. So if people don't use it correctly, then we're going to throw an exception. Simple as that. All right. Okay. So load is a form of set user as well, because we're essentially we're loading it with loading it is setting the user also. Now we can't have any private methods in an interface. That needs to be within inside of the object itself, so we need to have all public ones that people know that they can use. So user for the time being is that there's the likes of privileges and let's some simple some simple things that we want. Get name, public function, get surname, public function, get username. These are all getting things, and and what if we've changed something in any manner, as in like the name of it and so on. So there's like core pieces of information that we want to save. Yeah, then we're going to say save, and this will update the user information. Yeah, so it might be that the person decides to change their surname. You know, that they might have got married and they changed their surname. Therefore, they come onto the website and they change their surname, and then we need a save function. Now, we don't want to be worrying about using a user model, right? Because remember, we're abstracting it. The person who's using this doesn't need to care about how it's done. They just want to know that they change the name, their name and so on, and then they can save it, and that's it, save. Now, for example, this save, if any of the properties have been changed using the relevant set method, then a call to save must be carried out to make permanent changes to the database. Return equals boolean. I'm going to spell boolean correctly. Returns boolean. That's essentially it. Is that the things that it can change. So we want to know set name, for example, set surname. Can't be bothered writing this out. Get username. The likes of date of births and town and stuff like that, they can all come later, but do we really need them for the time being? We've got a load, and then we want I think that's it for now. If we've got a cookie, I mean, the point is that the login process is the thing that's checking whether they're logged in. So that's theoretically speaking as much as we care about for now on the user interface. The rest of the data is really of no relevance. That's it. Okay, so I'm going to cut this video short, and then we're going to do the user objects in the next one. But you should be getting a good idea about what we're doing right now. Okay, all right. See you in the next video.